What does it mean, really, when someone faces the world, stands up for freedom, and gives their life for their country? What does it mean for their family, their friends, their community, and the nation? And what about the little things they leave behind?
There are a lot of small communities across the United States that have made sacrifices, through many a war. But in Vietnam in particular, the town of Moriah, we lost five good men. Marcus Stoddard was one of the five.
You couldn't ask for a better guy. He'd do anything to help anybody. He was just one of these people that you just liked. Oh, he loved outdoors. He loved to go hunting and fishing and, oh man, right around in his cars. He loved cars. We used to go on the ice and spin around out there. Oh my God. 100 miles an hour we'd be going. Yeah, wouldn't go no place, but we'd be going 100 by the speedometer.
At the beginning of the Second Industrial Revolution, Moriah supplied nearly 9% of the nation's iron ore. And war after war, Moriah supplied soldiers. I'm Tom Henry. I spent my early childhood here and knew many of these people. Leaving this beautiful town for any war could not have been easy. On Christmas Eve, 1968, 19-year-old Marcus Stoddard, bound for Vietnam, left a can of beer in the rafters of my cousin's Dodge dealership to drink when he came home.
When I come home, I'll know how much you miss me. And when I come home, I'll know how much you really care.
I was hoping that can was going to be there, but I was so doubtful. I said, what would the chances be of something like that still being there?
I think it's hard for most people to fully understand what a thriving place Port Henry was around the turn of the century. It had already had, for most of the 19th century, a really prosperous iron mining and manufacturing industry, and that had created a tremendous amount of employment and growth and wealth. And everywhere you look around this community, you see the evidence of that prosperity. And you see things like the Mount Moriah Presbyterian Church, or the Sherman Free Library, or this beautiful roadblock called the Lee House, or you see the size and magnificence of the Witherby Sherman Company office buildings, or the bank on the corner. All of these things really speak to the kind of optimism that this community had about itself.
Marcus Stoddard's ancestors were early immigrants to America, settling in Massachusetts after arriving from England about 1635. His great-great-grandparents lived and died in Bridport, Vermont, but his great-grandfather moved to more prosperous Moriah about 1890. In 1903, my great-grandparents, Charles and Ella Henry, bought a small horse livery in the village of Port Henry, on a bluff overlooking Moriah's commercial waterfront.
Henry's Garage was an automobile dealership with the full service of maintaining automobiles, painting. There was a paint shop, and there was storage also, because the garage was such a mammoth building. There was many things going on during that time frame. It was a fun place to hang out. It had an old-fashioned Coke machine, and I remember the Coke bottles. It was that the green heavy glass, the old-fashioned Coke, and kids would go there, and there was a little sitting area there in the room where the cars were shown, and kids would go over, and usually sometimes with their parents, but other times they'd just go in because they knew Henry's Garage had a Coke machine, so it was kind of a popular spot there.
Marc's grandfather, also named Marcus Stoddard, had grown up in Moriah and become a well-known carpenter. By the time Marc was born in 1949, his father William was already carrying on the carpentry trade. Marc's mother Julia was a nurse's aide. Bill and Judy, as the boys' parents were called, both came from large families.
I remember Marc as an older brother. You know, it's when he died I was 12, and he seemed to be this bigger than life big guy, especially coming back from the Marines, and he would, you know, with his cars and his guns, and strong kid, and you know, and just I can remember the good times we had with the family. My mother, my brother, and myself, we were all born on January 20th, which was a strange situation, you know. It's the three of us all born on that date, and we'd celebrate our birthdays all together and I guess get them out of the way. It was something that was we were all proud of, you know, letting people know.
I used to catch the bus, me and Joey nephew. We'd walk up. Joey lived right next door to me. And every morning we'd walk up and catch the bus up to Marc's house. The bus stopped right there, right across the road from Marc's. And we'd go up to Gwyn Marc's, and his mother and father would be in there having coffee and stuff, and we'd go in there and talk with him.
But see, when Marc and I were growing up, we lived in the same little housing project. But we didn't Marc and I didn't become real close friends until we got like in, probably 9th or 10th grade of high school. So we didn't have a lot of time together. So we made good of the time we did have. You know, life was simple back then. For Marc and I mean, things weren't complicated. We would go about our business, do things, and it was just an easy time. I just hated it when he left.
Marc began honing his mechanical skills early on a 1954 green Chevrolet pickup that had been his grandfather's. Later he had a 1929 Model A Ford Roadster, a 1958 turquoise and white Pontiac Chieftain, a red Triumph motorcycle, and a mid-60s Dodge with a push-button transmission. After high school, he had no trouble landing a job at Henry's Garage. Did you ever ride with Marc in any of his cars?
Oh yeah, Marc and I, we used to, that one nice green and white Pontiac. We used to have some good times in that car. It was his actually first car I can remember driving with him.
Did he let you drive it?
Nope. He knew me.
Marc signed on to the garage as a mechanic in 1967, and he worked there full-time for a year. Probably had some part-time pieces there. I would imagine when he was in school, I think he worked there at the garage, and it was interesting because Henry's Garage, started as a livery and feed stable, and transitioned from horse and carriage. And it was interesting, the garage downstairs, you can see the stables, where the imprint in the bottom of the floor where they had 30 horses down there, and it transitioned into automobiles, Model T Fords. And by the time Marc came on, fast forward many years, the only Ford in the garage was that of Marcus Stoddard's.
My father sold motorski snowmobiles. We started selling snowmobiles probably in 1963. So Marc and my father was pretty lenient with me. I would help him. Joe took a sled. So Marc and I got the idea. Well, if Earl don't mind if you take one, he won't mind if you take two. So Marc and I decided to take two new sleds. Well, Marc and I started riding. We're the groom trailers we have now. So we're racing around with the sleds. Little bit known, Joe hits a rock with a sled. Bent the ski all to pieces. Marc says, well, we better get it back to my house. So Marc and I limped the sled home. Got in his backyard, we pick up the sled, Marc takes the ski off, takes the tie rods off. Take him down in his cellar, straightens him up. We'll back up, Marc put him back on the sled, off we go. Dad never was the wiser. Yeah, Marc had a pretty sharp mind as far as mechanically, because Marc's father was a carpenter. But I never saw Marc get too involved in carpentry. But when it comes to mechanics, Marc had an ability to just do it, you know what I mean? Mark didn't have to be shown. He'd go out there in the backyard, tear a motor apart, would put it back together, but tear it apart.
Marc's girlfriend, Patty Killon, recalled cruising with Marc in his Dodge, driving to Witherby to watch the mining operations, or to the lake to stargaze and contemplate their futures.
I knew who he was through family. His parents' house was adjacent to our bus stop. One morning, he was looking for their cat, and I was waiting for the bus. He asked if I had seen the cat and to keep an eye out for it. He had to get going, or he would be late for work. About 10 minutes later, the cat appeared at the bus stop, and I brought it to his house, and his mom, Judy, thanked me. The next morning, he was sitting at the bus stop in his blue Plymouth. He rolled down his window and thanked me, and we chatted. And he said, "Jump in, I'll bring you to school." From that day on, he would bring myself and my friends to school every day. On weekends, we would hang out if he wasn't helping his dad or working on a car. Marc liked rock and roll and country music. In the evening, sometimes we would just ride around, or I would do a puzzle with his mom, and he would do something with Michael, or watch TV with his dad. Marc wasn't one to go to bars to drink. We used to just ride around town. He loved to go to Switchback and look at the mines, and to Witherby and sit up at the hospital and watch the mines operate. I remember one time I went to his house. Like I said, he always brought me to school. Anyway, it had snowed that night. The roads were plowed, but still had snow on them. He told me school was just canceled. Did I want to go ice fishing? Because he had taken the day off. Of course I said yes. I left his house to go home and change my clothes. As I passed the bus stop, I told the kids that school was canceled. As we all started to head home, he opened the house door and yelled, "I was only kidding, there is school." I was so mad. I rode the bus that day. Marc had a heart of gold. He could be cracking a joke one minute and dead serious the next. He was very close to his mom. We would joke about how he would never leave the house without kissing her.
For the most part, life was carefree, except for the time he crashed a borrowed motorcycle trying to avoid a chasing dog, and during his senior year in high school, when a car clobbered him and a friend.
Me and Marc were going to Thai one night. I don't know why, if we were going down to the Ames's, the store down there. I don't know what we were doing, to tell you the truth, but we're coming down the hill there by the drive-in, and a car pulled out and ran right into us head on. Smashed that truck all to pieces. That truck was a total wreck. It's a wonder we didn't get hurt, but we didn't. Marc was always one of these people for safety. He had seat belts put in the truck. He put them in himself. Oh, he had to have them. And boy, the cripers, I'm telling you, boy, if it wasn't for them seat belts, I would have went right through the windshield. Man, it pulled them pretty right out of the floor, the bolts. That's how hard we hit. I never forgot that, man.
I think Marc and I might have been maybe sophomores in high school at the time. Of course, Marc and I had been driving our father's vehicles since we were about 12. So I think Marc's truck, the old truck I think was his grandfather's, with no plates on it. So Marc came up with a bright idea. They had a big field behind your house. So why don't we drive the truck around that field? Before Marc and I got done, it wasn't a field, it was a dirt track. Oh, how the dust would fly.
Marc's father and 4 of his uncles were veterans of World War II. In 1968, as 19-year-old Marc demonstrated his patriotism by enlisting with a Marine recruiter at his family's kitchen table, the U.S. was in the midst of the deadliest year of the Vietnam War. Marc's cousin, Bruce Hughes, was already there, serving throughout the Tet Offensive.
The problems of Vietnam are quite complex. They are a mixture of political turmoil, of poverty, of religious and factional strife, of ancient servitude, and modern longing for freedom. Vietnam is all of these things. Vietnam is also the scene of a powerful aggression that is spurred by an appetite for conquest. It is the arena where communist expansionism is most aggressively at work in the world today.
Yeah, Marc decided to enlist in the Marine Corps. He thought he would be drafted, from what I can recall in my mom's stories, is that he thought he'd be drafted in the Army, and he wanted to be a Marine. he made the conscious decision to join up to the Marine Corps. My parents, when Marc enlisted, were apprehensive. Dad especially, he'd seen the war. He was in Europe for a couple of years during World War II, and I think Marc felt compelled to go. It was what the government wanted you to do at that time. And it was Vietnam was a TV war. You saw what it was, and that's where he was headed.
I have lived daily and nightly with the cost of this war. I know the pain that it has inflicted. I know perhaps better than anyone the misgivings that it has aroused. And throughout this entire long period, I have been sustained by a single principle, that what we are doing now in Vietnam is vital not only to the security of Southeast Asia, but it is vital to the security of every American. A strong and a confident and a vigilant America stands ready tonight to seek an honorable peace, and stands ready tonight to defend an honored cause, whatever the price, whatever the burden, whatever the sacrifice that duty may require. Thank you for listening. Good night, and God bless all of you.
You want fast action, outdoor action, real man-sized action? Well, here's action that tops them all in the combat branches of today's Army. And now if you qualify, you can choose the action branch you want. Pick the artillery. Get in on the exciting missile and anti-missile field. Or pick the fast-moving armor. Work with the world's most up-to-date tanks. Or pick the mechanized infantry. The fast action branch for fast action outdoor guys. Whichever branch you pick, today's Army is the most mechanized freedom force ever assembled. So if you're for fast action, if you're an action kind of guy, take a long, strong look at today's Army. Pick one of the Army's 3 combat branches. The artillery, armor, or infantry. What's the next step? Into your Army recruiter's office.
Ma and Dad were very, very fond of Marc. He was a young man, and he was just a good, solid guy. And he worked as a mechanic in the shop, and they really liked Marc a lot. He was a great worker, and it was a difficult time. It was the Vietnam War, and I know Mom and Dad were very worried about Marc. Any person that young man of that age in our community that was going off to war. It was a very, very dangerous, very bothersome time, and he enlisted in the Marine, and Dad being a veteran, he very proud of his duty, but they were very worried about Marc.
Well, when Marc, to tell you the truth, when Marc enlisted, it kind of got me by surprise. At the time, I said, you know what, Marc, I'm too young to die. I ain't had enough good times yet, Marc. Just think about what you're doing. Oh, I'm gonna be a Marine, Marc says. I said, Marc, do what you want. But I'm 18. I haven't lived yet. I'm not joining Marc. I didn't want to go. Like being a coward, just did not want to go. And I'm so sorry he went.
Mark, he wanted to go in the service there, talked about it for years and wanted to go, for his country. And finally he went, and he loved his country, he loved his town and all of his friends here. He was a great person.
In December 1968, Marc returned home on leave after training at Paris Island and Camp Lejeune, and before reporting to Camp Pendleton for final training prior to his departure for Vietnam.
A few nights before he shipped out to go to Vietnam, we'd gone to his cousin's for dinner. The night before he left, the last time we were together, was at Lake Champlain. We were sitting, talking, looking at the stars, and he said, "This is the last time I'll ever see this lake or those stars." I said, "Why is that?" He turned to me and said, "Because I'm not coming back." I said, "Stop that talk. Everyone that goes over there feels the same way. You'll be back." He said, "I feel it in my gut." If my memory serves me right, he stored his car at Henry's when he went to Vietnam.
Well, one day, after Mark got home there shortly, he stopped down to the house and he said, "Do you want to go down to Henry's garage with me?" He said, "I want to see Clifford, Marion, and Dick, and George." I said, yeah, sure. This was probably about, I'd say 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It was late in the afternoon, Cold, It was on, I'm pretty sure it was on December 24th. So I think Mark had his mother's car. She had a 65 Chevrolet, Biscayne it was. Blue, funny colored blue, robin's egg blue or something it was with a white top. I remember the car, but anyways, we come down. We went in the garage here, and Clifford and Marion were behind the counter, so we went over and talked to them. They were all happy to see Mark, shaking hands with him. Oh, Mark, they liked him, so they thought the world of him. And so we stayed there and we talked for 5-10 minutes, and then me and Clifford and Mark wanted to come out and see George. George was out here working on some cars. So we come out, and George was all happy, and oh my God, George thought the world of Mark. Just like his son. George told me, he said, "He's just like my son," Mark was. So we were all standing here talking, right over there, and I heard the door slam over there, the big doors. There's 2 big doors that went into the showroom there, where Mary and Clifford had their offices. The door slammed, and I looked, and there comes Dick's Fisk. He had a bag with him. I said, "Wow, there's Dick." And Dick was all smiles, and geez, he was happy. Oh, Mark, shaking hands with him, and everyone said, "Boy," so am I glad I got this beer. He said, "Now we can all have a drink together." And so he opened up the bag and started passing the beer out. He goes to give Mark one. Mark says, "No, I don't want one, Dick. No. I said, "Go on, Mark, just one." And so Mark grabbed that beer out of Dick's hand, and he ran. He jumped up on that bench right there, and he set it right up on the beam up there. And he jumped back down, and he said, "When I get back from Vietnam, I'll drink that can of beer."
My mom was, of course, super supportive of her oldest boy. She would write to him every day. She sent a letter out, and she would describe what's going on around the family, community. And we'd send out care packages. I would guess they would go out every couple weeks. It took a while to figure out just Mark would communicate what he would work and what would last the trip and what wouldn't get crushed. I can remember those conversations, and then we'd put the care package together and get it out to him.
Sang from afar, and it hurts because you never get a second chance. It only makes things worse. And it goes without saying, it goes unsaid. The rain turns to gold, but don't let it go to your head. To your head. Mother, singing, it goes unsaid. The rain turns to gold, don't let it go to your head. To your head.
19 February 1969. Hi gang, arrived at Da Nang about 11 this morning. It is kind of warm, only took 3 hours from Okinawa. Ran out of money at Okinawa. When I got here, I bummed a couple bucks off a guy going back to the States. He gave me military payment currency. He said he didn't need it anymore. We should have a rocket barrage as they got one last night. You should see and hear those jets rolling overhead toward the north loaded with 500 1,000-pound bombs. February 20th, 1969. The local women waited until we got done eating, came in, picked up the garbage, and took what was good. I figured they were animals at first, but they aren't. They're just poor and ignorant. I'm not one bit sorry I'm here. I feel it's my pact to the world. It hurts to think they have to stoop that low when we have so much.
The greatest honor history can bestow is the title of peacemaker. This honor now beckons America. The chance to help lead the world at last out of the valley of turmoil and onto that high ground of peace that man has dreamed of since the dawn of civilization. If we succeed, generations to come will say of us now living that we mastered our moment.
And it goes without saying, it goes unsaid. The things that you want to do, you better do for your dead. For your dead. Mother thought that I was the best thing that ever happened to her. Look what's happened to me, mama, give it up. And it goes without saying, it goes unsaid. The things that you want to do, you better do for your dead. For your dead. You better do for your dead. You better do for your dead.
'24 February 1969. Dear Mom, Dad, and Mike. Well, I guess it's about time I wrote. Arrived in Quang Tri, was then sent to Camp Vandegrift, left there at 5 by chopper. I'm now about 1 million miles in the jungle. As we flew over by chopper, you should see the bomb craters. The 81mm mortars are really pounding away now. 26 February 1969. I'm still on top of a hill somewhere over here. Our jets have been bombing this area since I got here day and night. Artillery have been coming along behind it. I can't see how they possibly can last. There are barely any woods, just bomb craters. Mosquitoes aren't bad. Haven't had any incoming yet. That's good. Only 12 and a half months left here. I guess it's about time for chow. Probably have spaghetti. 5 March 1969. Wish I had brought my camera. I could have taken some good shots of this place. I'll try to describe it to you. It is in a valley, partly on the sides of hills. It is about 2 miles square. On top of the hills are artillery batteries. We all sleep in tents here. We all have air mattresses to sleep on. They are comfortable. The chow hall is right across the road. Most times I eat sea rations. You have your choice of what you want. I feel great. Don't mind getting only 4 or 5 hours of sleep a night. There's supposed to be a USO show here soon. This could really be a nice place to visit. I mean a vacation place. The war has really destroyed a lot of the beauty of this country. A person could love this place if it wasn't for the war. Barbed wire strung all around this place. A vacation land turned into a vast barren wasteland with tents, trucks, tanks, barbed wire, and bomb craters. Half the forests are burned away by napalm. I don't think our boys should be here. I guess it is a matter of U.S. pride more than trying to free these people from communism, which they have no idea of. This part of my life has taught me to look before I leap. I realize I have never expressed my feelings as such before. I guess I'm in a mood to let it all hang out.
We have ruled out attempting to impose a purely military solution on the battlefield. We have also ruled out either a one-sided withdrawal from Vietnam or the acceptance in Paris of terms that it would amount to a disguised American defeat.
9 March 1969. Today is Sunday. The only way I know is we get a big orange malaria pill. 2 people to pick up 1 pill. Billy Kimball is out in the field right now. His area is about 100 yards above mine. he comes in before I go out, I'll be able to see him. I'm going to Mass at 12 today. Man, am I ever sick of beer and pretzels. I tasted some smoked oysters in a can, like sardines. It was dark, so I didn't see what they looked like, but they tasted good. Send some smoked oysters if you get a chance. Don't send any sardines. Send bouillon cubes and beef jerky. I crashed at 9 last night. See, that's a new word I learned over here. It means hitting the sack. When I am writing this, you are about ready to crash. 14 March, 1969. On that patrol yesterday, we went by a village. There were people in the village and also water buffalo. I had the M60 loaded if one of those bulls came at me. 22 March, 1969. Just went on patrol yesterday, set 2 ambushes, which failed, got mortared off a hill, and marched about 6 miles in the heat. Where I am by the river, there's a real clear pool. Took my rubber mattress and went swimming. I'll be sending some money home about April 1st or so. I want you to buy me a camera, with a good case. Make a couple of car payments and insurance payments. Also, Mike will get $5. Don't pay over $50 for the camera, but get a good one like Kodak. Then you can send me a package of color film once a week. 26 March, 1969. These little kids are really something. They get soda and beer from the black market and sell it for 50 cents a can. One kid came up to me, this was while I was on a road sweep, and said, quote, "Buy beer, buy soda?" I replied, "No, I ain't got no money." She got mad and talked to herself all the way to the next bunch of guys. A tank rolled over part of my bunker while I was out on patrol. I can see bare spots where they have dropped bombs on mountains off in the distance. When we get done here, it will take 500 years for everything to grow back.
When Americans are risking their lives in war, it is the responsibility of their leaders to take some risks for peace.
Can't you hear it? The dam is breaking. Can't you feel it? The whole town is shaking. It won't matter what we do, that rage is coming through. It doesn't matter what we say, everything we build will wash away.
19 and 30 March, 1969. Some of the guys built a raft out of barrels. The raft sunk and the barrels went all over. One barrel floated away in the bushes. After dark, the barrel started to float downstream. So one of our wide-eyed and overly intelligent people woke everyone up and told them it was an NVA swimming downstream toward our lines. So everyone got to his bunker. All of a sudden, some idiot threw a couple hand grenades, blew off a claymore, and put the M79 grenade launcher in action. The next morning, the barrel was gone.
Can't you smell it? The fire is burning. Don't you know it? There's no returning. The prophecies are coming true. How it ends isn't up to you. It doesn't matter what we pay. Everything we build will wash away.
4 April 1969. The gunner I was a gunner to went to Da Nang for a couple weeks, so now I'm gunner. I guess it is okay. The gun weighs 23 pounds, and it kicks my ass each time I carry it, but those are the breaks. Instead of sending 4 cans of smoked oysters, send a can at a time. Also, that cheese in a can was great. Well, Bruce will be a free man today. 11 months, 6 days, I also will be free. 8 April 1969. When we left Milak yesterday, there was a mess of local village kids along the trail. Up ahead, one kid ran out and gave the gunner a belt of new M60 ammo. He gave the kid a stick of gum. 15 April 1969. I set my gear up on the trail and decided to look around. Looked at a couple of bunkers, and alongside one were 3 grenades, and they were live. Turned them into the command post. They patted me on the head and said, "Good boy."
Despite the division and opposition to the war in the United States, history will record that never have America's fighting men fought more bravely for more unselfish goals than our men in Vietnam. It is our responsibility to see that they have not fought in vain.
Another hand pulls you down. Another hand stops you in your tracks. Another day weighs heavy on your shoulders. One more face in the crowd. One more face whose expression is hopeless. One more lonely eye to look into. Maybe it wasn't meant to be like this at all. Maybe it wasn't meant to be so. Maybe we weren't supposed to live this long. Maybe the night will save us, I don't know.
26 April 1969. Dear Mom, Dad, and Mike, I guess it's about time I wrote. A lot has been happening lately. Well, I'll explain a little of it. Got choppered back to Fuller Artillery Base, moved to about 2,000 meters, set in that night. Next day, we went about another 3,000 to a brook, where we washed and filled our canteens. Left for the hill I am on now. We hit the hill with artillery and airstrikes, then proceeded up. We caught a little sniper fire and called artillery back on. This time we used airburst. We got the sniper and his rifle, or what was left of him. We were supposed to set in here for a couple more days. There are about 60 bunkers. The choppers are coming in with supplies and mail, so I best get my rear in gear and write more often. Time goes by so fast. Sometimes I think it's all a dream. Here are some of the things you can send me, okay? Kool-Aid, 1 dozen packs or more, pizza sauce, cheese, push-button can like before, 1 bottle of pizza-flavored ketchup, a bottle of olives and cherries, SpaghettiOs, lots of them, any kind of drink you can mix with water, small containers of tomato or V8 juice, Oreos baked by Nabisco. I'll think of more. All my love, Marc.
I want to end this war. The American people want to end this war. The people of South Vietnam want to end this war. But we want to end it permanently so that the younger brothers of our soldiers in Vietnam will not have to fight in the future in another Vietnam someplace else in the world.
Well, Marc was, when Marc first joined up, he was gung-ho. The first couple letters Marc sent me weren't too bad, but toward the end when I got the last letter he sent me, and he wasn't nowhere near enthused. Yeah, Marc was starting to see the reality of what it was all about. Actually, that was Marc's just before he got killed.
He gave up everything, you know what I mean, for his country. There's no doubt about it, you know. Man, just what a sacrifice, huh, for the whole community and the whole town of Mariah, you know what I mean? All them guys did. All them, the ones that got killed over there in Vietnam, they give up everything for us, for the town, you know. Boy, what a sacrifice, really. You know what? Family, everything. Who knows? You know, Marc would have got married and had kids, and never happened. You know what I mean? It's just sad. Boy, if you look back at it, you know, it's a awful tragedy, really. People have to go through that, you know.
He doesn't know what he missed. Let's put it that Marc doesn't know what he missed. Marc missed having a family. He missed seeing grandkids. He missed all of that. And I'm just so sorry for it. I'm just, you know what I mean? It's a lot of years ago, but it still brings back, every time I see his picture, it brings back memories of what he could have had. Marc was a very good mechanic. Marc could have had his own dealership, who knows?
When Marc was in Vietnam, I doubt at that age I had any comprehension on what his life was like. I think when you're 11, 12 years old, you know, you don't see the world as it truly is. I think I had the apprehension of him being over there. I can always remember being scared, you know, oh, gee, something might happen because you heard so much about it. But of actually the political end of it and his actual, what he was going through, I probably didn't have a clue until, you know, I had years and years to contemplate that after he passed. You know, as I went up in age, you know, when I was 20 years old, I was probably having the time of my life. And I was thinking, you know, well, Marc was over in Vietnam sitting on a hill defending his country, you know, and it's, I think about that a lot. You know, you think, geez, you know, I'm the fortunate one because of him. It was, you know, emotional time.
We would gather together every night at 6 to watch the news. We knew he was under extreme enemy fire, but never dreamed he would be killed. In the weeks prior to his death, he described what it was like there, sleeping in holes in the ground, constant air and ground fire. He would sign my letters, "Love, Marc, don't ever forget me." We had a feeling something had happened. All of a sudden, we got no letters or phone calls. His mom called my dad to come and tell me and bring me to their house. I'll never forget that day.
During Marc's wake and funeral, we had the wake at our house, which was extremely small. It's probably, at the time, it was half the size it is now. But Mom and Dad were going to have Marc come home, and it was crowded. They had to take windows out to get his coffin in. He couldn't come through the door. It was that large. And through the porch, they set it up. Marc came in. It was interesting. He was under glass. He looked fine. You know, he was in his Marine uniform at attention. It was a large coffin, so obviously Dad mentioned that, you know, he must not have been anything torn off him. I mean, you know, Dad thought, obviously, from World War II, how he thought about things, and we went from there. The day of the funeral was interesting, too. The Marines took Marc out, and we sat and went out through, and then the Marines were the ones who were the pallbearers. And as we went out the front door, Mom and Dad were in front of me, and I was with somebody else. And as soon as they went out the door, the Marines went, "Ten Ha!" And Dad immediately snapped to from his time in the military. I can remember that like it was yesterday. Just watching all of a sudden, you know, and all of a sudden he just, from the years of it, which I thought was something, and then went through the whole process. Yeah, 21 gun salute, and, you know, the taps. I can remember all that. Large crowd, the whole community.
That whole family was torn apart after his death, just one of the many families destroyed by a senseless war. I remember the day they brought Marc's body to the house to be waked, and the casket wouldn't fit through the door, so they put it in through the back porch window. The casket made marks on the window casing, and his dad would sit there, touching them, as if it was all that remained of Marc. The honor guard standing at the casket was amazing to us all. We had never seen it before. The day of the funeral, when we walked out of the house, 8 Marines stood on the walkway with swords held for us to walk under and saluted us as we walked past. Such a sad, sad day. There was a very thick piece of glass over Marcus, so that you could not touch him, which was very difficult for them as they so wanted to touch him one last time. Cause of death was shrapnel from enemy fire to his entire body. His parents received his personal belongings, and we received all our letters back 3 weeks after it was over. His parents kept his bedroom the way he left it. For 6 years, they never moved his sneakers from the spot he put them in. Michael has had a lot to handle at such a young age, the death of his only big brother. Marc was always teasing that poor kid. I'm sure it's very hard for him to go back and relive all of what the cedar chest has to hold. That house holds many, many memories, some good, some bad. Family members that had lived in the same town, only casually seeing each other, were brought together and bonded together after his death. My heart always ached for Michael, as he so loved his brother and idolized him. Michael was like my brother. We helped each other to get through his death. I went to see Marc's name on the memorial wall. What a rush of emotions to actually see all that were killed for no good reason. I have been to the memorial wall many times. My heart is full of memories of that man. He was my first love.
Ma and Dad were very, very troubled by Marc's death. It was almost like Marc was like another son, kind of. And it bothered Dad deeply. Marc passed in April, and Dad had been on the Selective Service Board, and he resigned from the draft board in August of 1969. I think Marc's death had an awful lot to do with the reason behind that.
The mementos we have for Marc are varied. I've got everything from his flag off his coffin to one of his uniforms to all his letters to hundreds of photos. And I would say my mother's probably 90% the reason for that. You know, she just kept them, and it was precious to her. And then over time, it became as precious to me. And you know, she just held on, and we have a cedar chest full of stuff. Everything, you know, from his basic training right up to things from Vietnam he sent back.
Tears of the soldier fall on the survivor.
His dad never got over it. He would often be seen having lunch at Marc's grave. Then one night we came home from work and he had committed suicide.
The road is long, no rest for the driver. Just look around you, the sky's burning red.
And so it sat, Marc's Schaefer beer can, tucked for decades in the shadows atop a 12-foot-high beam. Shortly after Marc's death, the local mining industry collapsed and many people moved on in search of employment. Others stuck it out, making long commutes, working in social or service industries, or reinventing their livelihoods. Nearly half a century later, when an application was in the works to place Henry's garage on the National Register of Historic Places, very few people remembered or knew about the beer can.
The fire department moved into Henry's garage in 1971. We understand by putting the building on the historical register was perhaps an avenue we ought to explore. We found that if we did get it on the state registry, there were monies available for a weatherization program or complete restoration. So I'm very happy to find out that we were successful in an application, and we are now on the registry both with the state of New York and also now on the National Registry. As part of the process, it required a tour or an inspection of the building by state representatives. Debbie Henry was kind enough and was available that day to help escort the state representatives and some of our younger local firemen through the building. And it's my understanding as they all met in the parking lot, Debbie had recalled the story of when she was 14 years old and started to share the story about Marcus Stoddard and a can of beer that was somewhere in the rafters of this 4-story building. And that kind of piqued everyone's interest. But the main focus of that day was we're here to look at the building And again, as part of the inspections process, take a tour and get a feel for the structure and make sure they're properly addressing the application process. But again, in the back of their mind, at the end of the day, they still search. So we're looking for this can of beer.
And we all had our little flashlights. I remember we went up on the roof, we went down into the cellar and saw the horse stables were, and then we went on the main ground where the main mechanic shop was, and I had a flashlight going and I didn't put it down, I remember, and I all of a sudden I'm looking at the ceiling and the beams, and there's the can, and it was just an incredible moment to see that Schaefer beer can up under the rafter.
The village occupies the rear of the firehouse on the first floor, and they were tasked with freshening up the place a bit. They gave it a thorough cleaning, and they were prepping walls and the rafters for a new coat of paint. And Buzz, from what I understand at the time, was working with Turk Boyle. They started to embark on the task of painting the rear of the building, and Buzzy came across the can, and he asked Turk, "What's the significance of this can? Why is this can here?" And Turk went on to explain the story. And Buzz made it a point, being a veteran, realizing the significance of it and the meaning behind it, that no one should ever touch this can. Leave it be. And so they attempted to. They had to pick it up and move it so they could paint the area immediately around it. And I know when I crawled up on the same bench that Marcus jumped up on to get a closer look at the beer can that day, I could see just a speck of white paint on the beer can, but they made it a point to put it back in its rightful place. And they continued on with their day. They completed the task, and the beer can's been sitting there ever since. The big mystery of the story is someone did open the beer can, however left the beer can still in its place, but no one seems to know who that mystery person was. But we're thankful that the can remains in place, and it's a reminder of the sacrifices that were made.
On Memorial Day weekend, 1971, U.S. Army Chief of Staff General William Westmoreland, who had been the commander of U.S. forces in Vietnam from 1964 to 68, visited Moriah to honor the community soldiers, including Buzz, Raymond Wright, the same man who happened to be in the right place to protect Marc's beer can during the painting of the garage. Buzz, too, had served in Vietnam and had earned the nation's highest military decoration, the Medal of Honor. He had risked his life under intense enemy fire to save his fellow soldiers by methodically storming and grenading a series of enemy bunkers that had pinned down much of his platoon. When Westmoreland addressed the crowd at the Mineville VFW, 4 young Moriah servicemen had already given their lives in the still raging war. The 5th, Michael Baker, would soon join fellow fallen heroes John Drake, David Jarvis, Joseph Ribeiro, and Marcus Stoddard.
So even though Henry's garage has all kinds of connections to people in Moriah for many, many decades, and all of those connections are very important to the building, I think hearing the story about Marcus Stoddard, the beer can that he left there before going off to Vietnam, brings all of this into much, much sharper focus and makes and tells us a story really about a single individual who loved the building, who worked there, and on the eve of doing probably the bravest, most courageous thing in his life, left something there that he wanted to come back to when his time there was done. And so much is in that moment, and so much is in that moment of that's also the story really being forgotten for a long time, and it being coming back to light in the search for finding the can and finding it there, and all of a sudden you bring this whole the connection of this community to the Vietnam War, and the story of this one individual going there and losing his life there, being brought into sharper focus, and it's such a beautiful, poignant, powerful story about place, about people, about also the power of objects to tell stories and to make us remember what's important in life.
Well, I think the beer can's kind of like the linchpin for bringing back memories. I mean, that's the point where people saw and then they realized the background of it and how crucial that was. You know, a guy that gave his life for his country had put that up there and hoping to come back and, you know, drink from it one day or celebrate. And it didn't happen. It will bring community together to see just a little memento of somebody that, you know, gave their life.
Give up everything, you know what I mean, for his country. There's no doubt about it.
Why don't we try to truck around that field? Before Marc and I got done, it wasn't a field, it was a dirt track. Oh, how the dust would fly.
Marc was always one of these people for safety. He had seat belts put in the truck. He put them in himself. Oh, he had to have them. And boy, Cribers, I'm telling you, boy, if it wasn't for them seat belts, I would have went right through the windshield.
Did he let you drive it?
Nope. He knew me.
100 miles an hour we'd be going. Yeah, wouldn't go no place, but we'd be going 100 by the speedometer.